Thanks, Emily. Is that better? No. Now? Whoa. Okay. Hold my shirt down a little bit. She's been a really good speaker liaison, by the way, so Emily. Before I get started, I'm just curious, who here is a ham already? Awesome. Well, we're going to have a lot of fun. So, without further ado, who wants to light things on fire? Yeah. Who wants to make the drones fly sideways? Okay, file under jokes that have officially jumped the shark. Who wants to turn their Wi-Fi up to 11? Who wants a cert that they can actually be proud of? What do all these things have in common? Ham radio. So a little about me. I've been a ham since 2013, so only a little over 2 years, but I've learned a lot. And it's been a very, very good and very inexpensive way for me to start learning about security. I'm going back to school for it soon, so I got into radio before I started really getting into security, but there's a lot of overlap in concepts. This was hacking before we had a word for it. And it's a good way for me to connect with geeks of all ages, help out my community in disasters. It's been fabulous, and there's a lot more to learn, and it's 100 years old. Before I go any further, just as a disclaimer, you may be thinking, do I really need to be licensed to do these things? We're a crowd that likes to bend the rules. Normally I'd encourage that. However, in this case, yes, you do need a license. Believe it or not, there are people out there who have nothing better to do all day than listen for illegal radio transmissions and narc on them. I've been told that the FCC warning letters are referred to among some hams as love letters from Laura, named for the woman in charge of the FCC's Enforcement Bureau. So don't get a love letter from Laura. You will not be happy. Pay $15 for a license or risk paying a $10,000 fine. Think of it this way. You can listen all you want. Join in, it costs extra. Also, I can't emphasize this enough. Assholes, do not fucking swear on the goddamn radio. So what do hackers have to do with ham radio? Well, there's already been a lot of great InfoSec-related research being done, so I'm just going to go through a few recent examples to give you a random sampling of what can be done. Rfid has been researched a lot in the past few years. So what do you think is the maximum read range that you can read an RFID tag? 10, 20 meters, something like that? Yeah. 600 meters. Wow, punchline spoiled. So at Black Hat in 2010, Kristen Paget, using just a directional antenna and a ham radio, read RFID tags at 500 feet. And she used only 1 watt of power to do this, which is already more than unlicensed people can use. Hams on that band can use up to 1,500 watts on the 33 centimeter band, with which she would estimate a 1 mile read range. Don't use 1,500 watts to read that, because you could cook chicken with that wattage. But you could. So, this happened last year at DEF CON and DerbyCon, Maggie Howdige's talk, Girl Fault Interrupted. She was an electrical engineer who got a ham radio license for the exclusive purpose of lighting things on fire. And this is this amazing scientific discovery. As a complete fluke while transmitting on walkie-talkies that weren't amateur, she discovered that she could trip the ground fault interrupt outlets in her bathroom. So she got a ham radio license, and she was able to hone this to precise frequencies. She would point a Yagi antenna at a blow dryer, and magic smoke released. And the science behind this is she made the solenoids in older GFCIs resonate. Faraday's law, they resonated their frequency, so she blew them up and started fires. So, okay, you ruin a few blow dryers, no big deal. But GFCIs are also required in medical devices like respirators and dialysis machines, so this has implications for remote kill. You don't want to start a dialysis machine on fire. Speaking of hot things, toys. Micah Scott reverse engineered a high-end Swedish vibrator by Lilo. It had a lackluster remote control. There are some vibrators that are remote controlled without a cord. She sniffed the radio transmissions between the remote and the vibrator, Then she reverse engineered, she built a better remote that was longer, stronger, and with sonar. So there's a lot of work out there like this. Basically, you have a weird radio device that you need to work better. It doesn't work very well, so reverse it and build a better one. And amateur radio gives you a much better understanding of how to go about doing that. Speaking of toys, you do need some tools to be able to do this. So there are tons of tools that hackers have made for radio hackery. Has anyone seen this before? It's getting famous. This project was originally Real Men and Women Carry Pink Pagers by Michael Osman and Travis Goodspeed. It's very hard to find these now because the word is out. I looked, they don't make them anymore. They took them off the market. But this is basically a little girl's pink pager texting device, the I Am Me by Girl Tech. So Girl Tech is forever in my browser history. Well, until I clear it. But basically, the radio chip in it wasn't frequency locked, so you can turn a $13 texting machine into a $1,000 spectrum analyzer. The frequency range overlaps with the 70 centimeter and 33 centimeter bands. And this pink pager was used a lot in InfoSec-related research. It was recently used in the garage door hack, Open Sesame. They were able to sniff the opening codes of the openers using the pager and then reprogrammed the garage door openers. This is a great example of taking somebody else's obsolete technology and making it do your bidding, which is something that hackers have been doing for years. Software-defined radio. Software-defined radio basically is when your computer stands for separate hardware components like mixers, amplifiers, other peripherals. So there are a lot of SDRs out there. The Holy Grail is the one on the left, the Hack RF, designed by Michael Osman. It can transmit and receive anywhere between 1 megahertz and 6 gigahertz, which is pretty much all the frequencies you would ever hope to need. That actually just changed. I learned this last night. It used to be 10 megahertz. Now it's down to 1 megahertz. It does need an amplifier for transmissions because it runs on USB power, but more transmitting power is a privilege that only hams have because of power level regulations for unlicensed people. Also, similarly, but only for Bluetooth, is the Ubertooth 1, which he designed. A lot of really good Bluetooth work has come out of that, and nothing like it existed before. I'm not in Bluetooth protocols, but it solved a lot of problems of why you couldn't research Bluetooth beforehand. So that's the hardware. Here's some of the software. There's a ton of open source software tools available for playing around with radio. These are just a few examples. FLDigity is software for digital modes. It's open source. It's on SourceForge, so your mileage may vary. It interprets digital signals into ASCII text and transmits text into digital modes. So these are the cheat codes if you want to transmit in Morse code or digital modes like PSK31. This translates it into things that you can read and translates things that you can read into things that you can send out digitally. Echolink is a voice over IP style system for amateur radio stations, connects all over the place. So you can get on here and I could listen to a repeater back home in Madison. Chirp is the thing that will save you so much time. It's a very easy way to program radios using a USB to audio cable. It's also, it's one of the tools that's included in Kali. In general, it's very good for uploading and downloading information. It can handle several different kinds of radios, and without Chirp, a 5-minute process can take hours. Programming is a bitch when you're only working with buttons. So why all of this interest? Why are hackers interested in amateur radio? This is a map of all of the frequency allocations in the US. Everything, amateur radio, cell phones, maritime, military, you name it. There's a lot of overlap too. Unlicensed bands are unlicensed because they're so short range, and many radio things within that short range will assume that they're the only things on the band, so they don't necessarily need to follow security protocols. There are a ton of devices crowded around the ISM bands, 900 megahertz and 2.4 gigahertz, or 33 and 13 centimeters, which overlap with ham bands. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, XB, cordless phones, RFID, some drones. These are everywhere. Everything has a radio in it. I have a radio on my wrist. I may or may not have a radio in my pants. I'm not wearing pants. And this works like, it's like us having a secured area. If you only talk in the secured area, anyone you talk to must be okay to talk to, right? We're clear? No one has ever social engineered their way into somewhere that they're not supposed to be. Never happened, ever. Obviously, this is not the case. Unlicensed bands are not a secured area. Unlicensed spectrum is everywhere out there. And as Kristen Paget and others after her, ham radio can pick up on all of it. This is just a zoom in so you can see the overlap. For a good proof of concept of this and to see how unsecured some things are, see the Travis Goodspeed's party mode belt buckle. Basically, he walked around and fuzzed an entire city's power grid just for fun because his belt talked to other stuff that it wasn't supposed to talk to. So you may be wondering why things on the ISM bands aren't encrypted. Part 97 of the FCC rules states that it is illegal to obscure the content of a message so that someone listening can't ascertain its original meaning. Digital modes are not encryption, by the way. They're just different means of communication. Morse code isn't encryption. PSK31 isn't encryption. Just as converting this very important message on the bottom to hex is not encryption. Encrypted transmissions are illegal in amateur bands except for communicating telemetry data with RC aircraft and for satellite control. And only on the RC aircraft bands does that apply, which is mostly 6 meters, 70 centimeters, some of the ISMs. Steganography, however, is more of a gray area. It's not encryption per se, just obfuscation, so the rules aren't quite as clear. For a good talk on the theory behind this, watch Paul Drapeau and Brent Dukes' DEF CON talk last year, Steganography in commonly used HF bands. So, with that in mind, who wants to be a ham? Yay! So now I'll go through the process of what the licenses are and then how you get them. There are 3 license classes in the US. Technician is the lowest level. The technician exam is very easy by design. You don't spend months studying for the tech exam. You really don't want to. The idea is you get licensed first and then you learn your way around amateur radio, not vice versa. They want to make sure you can pass simple common sense and rules reading test. And the tech license is restricted to VHF and UHF bands, which means above 30 megahertz. These are shorter range frequencies, so this just means that you can't cause an international incident. Okay, pointed about that and you want to cause an international incident, you'll need to go up to general. General is the second one. It's kind of like the junior varsity of the licenses. It's like technician, but has some HF privileges below 30 megahertz, so you get longer ranges. It doesn't have access to all of them, but the vast majority. The highest level is amateur extra, usually just called extra. This gives you all privileges on all bands. One thing that extras only get is reciprocal international operation. That means you can take your radio to another country that has an agreement with the US, which is a lot of them, and operate there. Obviously, if you're in the US and licensed in the US, you can talk to other countries. I'll get into that later. But to actually operate while you're in another country, you need to be an extra. The extra exam, you may have heard, is very hard. However, the number of extra licensees has increased dramatically since the Morse code requirement was dropped from the exam in 2007. No more Morse test. So altogether, there's over 700,000 hams in the US, which is the most it's ever been. I think there's a handful of other countries that have more hams than the US. I know Japan is one of them, so let's catch up with them. So 700,000, rumors of its death have been completely exaggerated. The exams themselves are all multiple choice, and they're all unlimited time. Tech in general, 35 questions, extras 50 questions. So it's easier and more useful than the CISSP. That was almost like cyber, so I'm going to drink.
What about CEUs?
CEUs. I don't think the ham exams give you CEUs. Oh, you said they're more useful than CEUs.
So for the CISSP,
oh, no, hams don't have any continuing education. Once you're licensed, you never need to retest unless you let your license expire, and you never need to take continuing ed. And the exam process is very low tech. If you take your exam, you'll notice that it looks completely outdated, and this is on purpose. It's so that exams can be given anywhere at any time. They want to make it as easy as possible for people to get in. And the tech and general exams are usually concerned, I shouldn't say usually because they're standard questions. They're concerned with things like rules and common sense, very basic electronics, safety, band plans. As far as calculations, there are really only two types that you'll need to use. Does anyone know the speed of light? Speed of light, 300 million meters per second. And radio waves travel at the speed of light through air. So the frequency wavelength calculation, just get good at dividing 300 by things. And the only other formula is Ohm's law. Who knows Ohm's law? Somebody say it. Yep. Current times resistance equals voltage. Voltage times current equals power. So that's really all you need to know, and these things can be studied very quickly if not. The extra exam is more electronics heavy, things like radio design, circuit theory, stuff that you might not actually use in your everyday ham practice. But like I said, again, the Morse code requirement is no more. For those of you who follow me on Twitter, this is the duck if they throw things slide. However, just because the Morse code has no testing anymore doesn't mean that it's not used. Morse code is very useful. It's more easily detectable than voice or data when signals are poor because it uses so little bandwidth. A lot of repeaters use Morse code for station identification. It's also shown up in CTFs and puzzles. For example, it's been a part of DEF CON badge challenges in the past. I think possibly B-Sides ones as well. So it's just, when you need it, it's there and it's easier to detect. You can't hear voice signals very well when the signal is poor, but you can still hear the universal distress call. SOS. I almost did. Bourbon is awesome. I almost didn't spell SOS. So the process of the exams is pretty straightforward. You walk in, you pay $15, you take the test. Yes, $15. It's also cheaper than a CISSP. And if you pass, you can take the next one and then the next one after that. The exams need to be taken and passed in sequence. You can't skip over the tech and general. You can take all three in this if you pass them all, but you can't skip straight to extra, no matter how elite you think you are. So the $15, your license is paid from that fee for 10 years, and after that, you just renew it online for free. So it's very easy. You'll be assigned a call sign, and then you can later go back and get a vanity sign. I got once, K7FTW. Sorry, unfortunately, N0OB is taken, as well as all the other naughty ones like W4NG. Vanities used to cost money, but they're going to be free as of September 1st. Volunteer examiners, by the way, don't get paid for the exam fee. We work for free. The money all goes to the ARRL, the American Radio Relay League, which is the big test organizer and resource provider. Occasionally, the exam team gets expenses, too. So where can you be made a ham? A great way to do it is to get tested at a security con. A lot of cons are starting to offer them. And if you're free to, B-Sides is offering them in the training ground room, which is Sienna, upstairs from 7 to 9 p.m. Bring a photo ID and $15 in cash or check, and we can get you tested. Even though it's a 2-hour window, it's not going to take you 2 hours. Expect maybe 20, 30 minutes tops. If you can't come tonight, a lot of other cons have them. DEF CON's going to run them via DC 408. Skydog Con has had them. Circle City Con had them for the first time this year. I was the team liaison. Some other B-Sides events have them, including Boston and Rhode Island. If you know of any others, let me know. If you can't get tested at a con, or you just don't go to cons that much, there are a lot of local exam sessions. Most major cities will offer at least one session a month. So check the ARRL's website, arrl.org, for local exam sessions to find one in your area. Studying for exams there's a lot of information out there, and this is because the entire exam pool for all 3 levels is given away completely for free by the ARRL. Therefore, there's a lot of study material out there that's been developed by hams for hams. There are some books. The ARRL puts out a series of very comprehensive exam prep books that cover both the ham exam themselves and ham radio culture. And I'm putting this in scare quotes because the book is full of scare quotes for some reason. Gordon West also makes study guides that have the exam material in audiobook form, so you can listen on your commute, which is awesome. There are a lot of online study guides and practice exams. Just in general, Google Amateur Radio Study Guide and you'll be fine. When I put my slides up online, I have some links in the last slide. There are also a lot of mobile apps out there for pretty much every platform you can think of, even Windows Phone, which is barely a platform. I just learned recently, too, that the Ubuntu Hams IRC chat has an exam question bot that'll feed you random questions, and actually also a ham exam Ubuntu package that you can install. If you want to learn in person and with a group, there are also ham radio bootcamp classes out there, a 1 to 2 day crash course that covers all of the exam material. They'll often have an actual test at the end, if not at least a practice test. DEF CON in the past has held them. I've been told they're not going to have one this year, but the Wireless Village may have other offerings. Just as an important warning, the question pools do change every 4 years. They're staggered, so General just changed last month. Just make sure you're working with the most up-to-date material. There usually aren't too many drastic changes. Like, it's not like they found a new speed of light or anything, but maybe they will. Who knows? So there's a lot of different ways to go about it, and my own study process varied quite a bit for the 3 exams. While I was preparing for the technician exam, I used the ARRL manual more. Being new to the ham world, I found it really helpful having some context for the exam material. For general, 2 months later, I spent a little longer, focused more on the test material than on the actual ham culture. By the time I got to extra, I basically just said, fuck it, memorized the question pool by taking a practice test every day, went in, did fine. I knew that there were large portions of the exam that I would never have to use again in real life, and I was right. And 9 months later, I still know what vestigial sideband is, and I don't know what other knowledge that pushed out of my brain, but I'm scared to find out. So now that you've gotten your license, what next? First step, get a radio. The beauty of ham radio, only as expensive as you want it to be, and I mean that. A good HT, which is a handheld transceiver or handy talkie, starts around $30. The example I have on the screen is the Baofeng UV5R. It's a great starter radio. I've used it a lot, and it's $30, and it comes in Technicolor. Amazon has lots of radios. Electronic stores usually have at least a few. If you got a car here, there's a ham radio supply store around here somewhere. But HTs vary greatly in price, and this is because they have other features it depends on the frequency range, depends on the maximum power. Most of them are dual band, some are tri-band, but you don't need the fanciest model. You can get the fanciest model if you want, but you don't have to, because you don't need a radio that does everything. The radio that you take out into the Daystar with you needs to be a radio that you aren't afraid to lose, break, or spill beer on. I've done all of these things, and you will too, so don't invest in the top of the line. And HT is a great starter. It lets you talk to people at cons, join ARIES, which I'll get to in a minute, just generally explore. Even if you are an extra, like I said, they're mostly UHF and VHF, but even if you're an extra, this is where you'll be spending most of your time. This is where your local repeaters are. This is where most of your local hams are. You've had your hand up for quite a while.
Hack the cheap Chinese radio to make a really good Chinese radio?
I've never tried before. Do you want to try? I don't know. That's an excellent question. Probably. Okay. The question, by the...
They're not very locked down stock. So.
Yeah. So I don't know how all people can hear. The question was, can you hack a cheap Chinese radio to make a good radio? And the answer is, there's a community for that. So cool. Learn something new every day. Yeah. Also, get the USB programming cable. They're like $10 and they'll save you so much time. I mentioned Chirp earlier. It's so much easier than trying to program in all of your local repeaters and all of the weather stations, which is a pain in the ass because you have to set so many different settings. Programming cable will save your life. If you're a quick draw with a soldering iron, you can also build a radio. A great place to start is the Soft Rock Kit. This is an $80 SDR. It gives you access to a lot of different HF bands. Unfortunately, the comic is only a slight exaggeration. There are a lot of parts. However, it's a really good way to learn how radio is constructed. Taking a thing apart helps you learn how it works, but so does building things. Once you have a radio, see how many times you can answer the standard hacker question, what can I make this thing do? And get a cheap Chinese one so that you can build a better one. A lot of older hams in particular, but also who've been operating since before cell phones and the internet are into DXing, which is long-distance communications, often international. This was the way to talk to Germany and Japan and Australia before cell phones and before the internet, and they still do it. And you can contact hams all over the world, and they'll send you those QSL cards up on the screen. QSL is Q code for Acknowledge Receipt of Transmission. There's also contesting, contacting as many stations as possible within a given time. QRP, 1 watt or less, see how many communications squeeze out of not a lot of power. Fox hunting, which is using radio direction finding to search for hidden transmitters. A lot of you were probably at BSides Las Vegas last year, right? If you saw people wandering around the they were in the wireless essentials class. They were wandering around with laptops and antennas, and that's what they were doing. They were fox hunting. Speaking of cons, bring it to cons. It's a very good back channel. 146.580 has become sort of the standard HackerCon frequency. I haven't been on today, so I don't know how much activity is going on in there, but I'm sure at DEF CON there will be a lot of cons going on. A lot of cons also have a wireless village or a wireless CTF, so go be their friend. There are a ton of offerings for that at DEF CON. And hey, there's a whole track here on it this year. You can also talk to space. Anyone know what EME stands for? Earth, Moon, Earth propagation. You can bounce signals off the moon. I love the future. There are also amateur satellites. You can even talk to the International Space Station. The astronauts there are hams. Just don't make that go sideways. You can make drones go sideways. Like I mentioned before, there are non-amateur drones, obviously, but amateur ones, well, you'll get better range and better control of your drones. So play around with that. Step 3, nonprofit. I mentioned ARES before. ARES is Amateur Radio Emergency Services. Their motto is when all else fails. And it's true. When natural disasters hit, the first thing that happens is all of the cell towers die. Public safety incidents, the cell towers are completely overwhelmed. And cell towers, this is because they're built on exposed places like the top of a hill. And also on cell towers are police, fire, EMS radios. I didn't say cyber, I just feel like a drink. So in these disasters, ARES teams step in to provide emergency communications to cities, counties, states, the Red Cross, other volunteer organizations. And to practice, we do radio communications at public service events like marathons, bike races, parades, other scheduled disasters, practicing for the real thing. In the case of the Boston Marathon bombing, that was a scheduled disaster turned real disaster. Hams were there, and it's a good thing they were there. It turned into a real emergency deployment. But even aside from extreme cases like that, emergencies do happen. I was doing ARES deployment for a bike race last year in rural Wisconsin, really bad cell signal, and we had a cyclist who needed medical attention, so we were there. And they also, ARES does simulated emergency deployments too, like we actually practice transmitting emergency messages. But even if you never end up helping out in an actual emergency, it's just a really great way to learn about operating and to connect with your local ham community. You get to play with equipment that you might not own yourself. You get to practice actually talking to people. On the same subject of nonprofit, pay it forward, make more hams. Not like that. If you have a general license or above, you can get certified to become a volunteer examiner. And then you can come help out on exams. With any level of license, you can also be a volunteer license instructor or online course mentor. Above all, have fun. Learn from old hams. There's a really well-established culture of teaching and mentorship. Many old hams will have a good stockpile of radio gear that they'll let you play with. runs Field Day in June. This is a huge nationwide and Canada and the Caribbean ham radio event. Everyone talks to everyone. Everyone gets together outside and geeks out. It offers a lot of opportunities for experimentation. So especially if you're just getting started and don't own much equipment, it lets you play around on all over the place. And the beauty of ham radio is that it offers a low barrier for entry into a world of hacking. There are a lot of reasons for this. The cost is low, which makes it accessible to more people. There's less gatekeeping, less questioning of credibility. You do have that piece of paper, so I'm an extra just like the people who have been doing it since before I was born. And yes, they know more than me, but I'm here too. It's definitionally a hobby, not a profession. So all that's left is just a passion for tinkering and sharing knowledge. Michael Osman, I mentioned him before, the Hack Rfid Tooth 1 guy, gave a talk at the Dayton Ham Fest a couple months ago. He's a new ham, about his path from electronics kid to hacker to ham. And he talked about how the next generation of ham radio operators will not be the people who are just doing it to talk to people about weather and pacemakers and prostates. They will be the tinkerers, the experimenters, the hackers, and it's absolutely true. I mean, it speaks for itself. You're all here right now. We had an amazing turnout at DEF CON last year. 200 people came to take their exams. There's always more to explore, and not nearly enough people are playing with radio for InfoSec or otherwise, and it lets you keep that hacking knowledge alive and create new knowledge, interacting with the technology around you. So it's over 100 years old, but it's still going strong, and we're the ones who are going to keep it going strong and keep it alive. So party like it's 1909. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
You mentioned that encryption is a no-no when you're... Okay, so if a ham band overlaps with something that has encrypted communication, but the encrypted communication has an unencrypted frame, can you jack around with the unencrypted frame and not get in trouble?
I don't know. The question was if you have an encrypted something encrypted that it overlaps with a ham band, but sorry, is this one still on? I'm going to have you. You asked a multifaceted question, so.
I was curious if a ham band overlaps with some unencrypted. If a ham band overlaps with encrypted communication, but it has an unencrypted frame, if you can jack around with the unencrypted part of whatever's going around and not get in trouble?
Does anyone know the answer? Because I don't.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Oh, I just mean transmit.
No, but
It's on your band, you can listen to it.
transmitting is okay. That does count as interference. Okay. The answer is no, because it's considered interference. Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah.
There's a local group that provides testing for free. Why is it that some groups will test for free but others charge $50? Or is the public picking up the tab?
They don't I don't think they have to charge anything for it. They can charge up to $15. That's the maximum, and most do to recoup exam-related expenses. I'll goes back. But there are a couple of, ARRL is the largest VEC, but there are volunteer examiner coordinator at the organization that does it, but there are some others, and I know Laurel is one that does do them for free. Yeah?
So right now you're saying that you're not allowed to encrypt the radio communications. Do you see that changing in the future, especially since there is a danger with medical devices, for example?
Question was again about encryption. Whether you see it changing in the future for encrypted transmissions to be allowed, especially with medical devices and other, just as more things in general are networked. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, that's the thing. Everything is everything is networked now, and the protection isn't really going along with it. It's like the desire to connect all the things to each other has surged way ahead of the desire to actually protect our data. So I don't know. That's a good question. Gray shirt first. You haven't asked a question yet.
So the idea that you shouldn't have encrypted transmission is specifically for ham bands, though, right? Not general radio.
Sorry, what was the first part of that?
Saying that you shouldn't have encrypted transmission is specifically in the context of ham transmissions, right? Not general radio.
Yeah, but they overlap. A lot of them overlap. ISM is they're unlicensed bands, and they overlap with amateur bands. So I don't know.
So are you using encryption if you're supercharging your Wi-Fi?
There's a way to do that. Somebody just explained this to me last night. How there's a it was a little bit over my head, but it does. They're basically yes. It's not encryption, but it's authentication on both ends. Basically, is how you do it if you're supercharging your Wi-Fi.
What if you spit your call sign in with the encrypted stuff?
Then it's not very encrypted, is it?
Just saves the legal talk.
You do have to station identify every 10 minutes. You have to identify your call sign, otherwise they get, yeah.
We have to publish it.
Okay. Can I do that through Twitter?
Through Twitter, yeah.
The exam time from 7 to 9 is required when you study during exam period. The normal person being able to study in capacitors would require months of credit.
If you study and then if you study now for a couple of hours and then come in at 7, you could certainly try. I had a friend at Circle City Con who took a 2-hour exam prep class, then studied for a few hours and was able to pass the test same day. So tech exam, like I said, it's pretty low a barrier, but you shouldn't go in cold unless you have like an electrical engineering background.
If you're not feeling confident, get up on Saturday.
That's true. Yeah, DEF CON's offering them too, so you can take a few more days to study. Yeah.
Not speaking of the legality of it, but I think it's a PSA project that's online, and they purposely put in error, incorrect characters. There's some checksum and stuff in there, and it puts a encoded message similar to TrueCrypt's secondary OS that we did with the second key. So it looks like a legit unencrypted message, and it has a in there that's also got error checking, and you have to have the code to undo it, unencrypt it on the other side. So
Deniability.
basically, yeah. I mean, well, if that's what's happening. Right?
If that's what's happening, but we're not saying it was.
Somebody has to prove it, and they have to have the key and whatnot. You do have higher error rates, but
Should I repeat that for the microphone? Because this is going to be recorded. Let's get back onto the side of plausible deniability. Yeah.
Alright, what if someone wanted to build a really scary, like potentially glitchy experimental transmitter? But we don't know yet, unless it's tested.
But there are spurious emissions laws, so if you test them and they are emitting, you gotta fix it, basically.
But you can test it.
Yeah, but again, potentially dangerous. 1500 watts is nothing to mess around with. Just because it's the max doesn't mean. The question was, what if you wanted to build a big, scary transmitter, basically? Yeah. eBay, your source for scary transmitters. Yeah. I think the narcs would find you and they would kill you. No. I mean, you can look up somebody else's call sign, you're going to get figured out pretty quickly. There are people with no lives who do that. Yeah.
So one of the other things to watch out for if you're purchasing equipment, there are a lot of people who will sell things under someone else's call sign and they are that. And what?
Sorry?
Sometimes people try to sell you equipment under someone else's call sign to hook up and such. that?
He says, be wary of people trying to sell you ham equipment using other people's call sign. Because amateur radio equipment can only be resold for ham purposes by hams. Yep.
When you get your call sign, the address that you sign up with does become public. So if you don't want their home address to put on there, have a PO box or something.
It's a good point, just in case anyone. Yeah, if anyone is worried about doxing themselves or out, call sign does have an address associated with it, and it is in the FCC's public database. So you can. It doesn't need to be a home address; it can be a PO box.
I think they will let you make that private now, but it's only after it becomes public first.
Oh, really?
It has to be public for like a month, and then they'll let you apply to hide it.
But that's good to know because I didn't know that. So he says you can apply to make it private after it's been public for a month, which they should come to DEF CON or B-Sides and have a talking to about privacy.
Do you have like a scraper that you can go into the ones that went private?
I'm sure that can be written very easily.
It exists.
Okay, well there you go. Such a list for private addresses. But it's something. It's one more step. It's something. Again, the having everything networked and communicated and open, privacy hasn't caught up with that yet.
Tuscany.
That's right. What, you mean you don't live here? This is home away from home, yeah.
More important note, you do not need a license to purchase ham radio equipment.
Yes, that is true. You do not need a license to purchase ham radio equipment. That is a good point. Actually, the Circle City Con staff all used ham radios just on an FRS band. So it can be done. Yeah, I know, but it's... Yeah. Sorry. Let's edit that out, por favor. Edit what out? It never happened. This is the underground track, right? Right? Okay. Yeah. All right. I talked a little fast, but does anyone have any other questions? Discussions, points?